What if I told you that something as simple as breakfast helped women survive one of the most brutal chapters of history? It might sound unbelievable, but during World War II, a surprising meal became a lifeline for female prisoners of war. Something as ordinary as oatmeal, bread, and potatoes. Could food really save lives in such extreme conditions? Let's dive into how this humble breakfast played a critical role in the survival of thousands of women trapped in the horrors of captivity. When we think about wartime prisoners, we often imagine starving, malnourished individuals left to suffer under the harshest conditions. And for many, that was their reality. But for German female POWs during World War II, there was one unexpected aspect of their daily routine that made a massive difference in their survival: breakfast. In the midst of war-torn Europe, these women were subjected to horrific conditions in prisoner-of-war camps. Starvation, disease, and the constant threat of violence were ever present. Yet one simple, everyday meal became their lifeline. This was no ordinary breakfast. It was a carefully chosen combination of ingredients that provided the necessary fuel to endure some of the worst conditions imaginable. The surprising part? It was a meal that didn't seem like much at first glance. So, what was this breakfast, and how did it help these women survive? In this video, we're going to uncover the secret behind the breakfast that kept them going and how it provided more than just physical nourishment. It gave them strength, hope, and a chance to hold onto their humanity during the darkest of times. When we talk about survival in extreme conditions, especially during wartime, we often focus on the obvious factors: shelter, protection, and escape. But one of the most overlooked and powerful factors in survival is food. It's not just about the ability to fill your stomach. It's about what that food can do for your body and mind. For German female prisoners of war, food wasn't just fuel. It was their weapon against the daily grind of brutality and deprivation. The POW camps of World War II were no different from any other concentration or internment camp in their approach to food. Rations were minimal, often barely enough to keep the body functioning. In many cases, the food served to prisoners was of poor quality, lacking vital nutrients. What little was provided was often contaminated, insufficient, and sometimes downright dangerous to consume. In these dire conditions, having access to a meal that could give the body strength and sustain energy was the difference between survival and death. In a world where starvation was a constant threat, it was the strategic choice of food that made the difference. Female prisoners, who were often subjected to even harsher conditions than their male counterparts, faced the added stress of psychological and physical warfare that was particularly aimed at diminishing their strength. These women, many of whom were taken from their homes and thrown into the horrors of war, had to rely on whatever scraps were given to them. But that was only part of the equation. The true secret to their survival lay in how they used food to maintain their will to live. Breakfast, in particular, was critical. When you're in a prisoner camp, every meal is a battle. The importance of the first meal of the day cannot be overstated, especially when survival itself hinges on the smallest of margins. The breakfast that many female POWs relied on wasn't just a small break in the day. It was a carefully composed, high-energy meal designed to give them the physical and mental stamina they desperately needed to endure the next 24 hours. The components of this meal were remarkably simple, yet remarkably effective. Oatmeal, a staple breakfast food in many countries, became the backbone of this survival meal. Rich in carbohydrates, fiber, and B vitamins, oatmeal provides the body with a slow-release energy source, which is vital in the physically demanding environment of a POW camp. Unlike quick-digesting sugars that provide a burst of energy followed by a crash, the complex carbs in oatmeal help sustain energy levels over a longer period of time, preventing fatigue from setting in too early during the day. Along with oatmeal, prisoners were often provided with brown bread, which, though coarse and hard, was a valuable source of sustenance. Made from whole grains, brown bread was high in fiber and offered a modest amount of protein and minerals, such as iron and magnesium. These nutrients helped to build and repair muscle tissues, which were essential for the female POWs who were tasked with hard labor, often under duress. Bread, as tough as it was, provided them with the extra strength they needed to endure long hours of forced labor, exposure to the elements, and an ever-present lack of rest. But perhaps the most important ingredient in this breakfast, the one that often made the difference, was the boiled potato. Potatoes, often seen as a basic food, have an incredible range of benefits. High in potassium, which is crucial for muscle and nerve function, they also contain vitamin C, essential for boosting the immune system and protecting against the diseases that ran rampant in the unsanitary conditions of the camps. Potatoes were filling, cheap, and a stable form of nutrition that kept the POWs from losing too much weight too quickly. Taken together, these foods formed a survival meal that was simple yet effective. Each component was chosen with care to maximize energy, sustain the body, and support the mind. But this meal wasn't just about physical survival. It was about mental resilience as well. Imagine waking up each day to the bleakness of a POW camp. The cold, the smell of sickness, the relentless march of time where every hour feels like an eternity. You know that food is scarce, that every meal is a gift, and yet you hold on to one small hope. That breakfast, that humble bowl of oatmeal or boiled potatoes, will give you the strength you need to face the horrors ahead. For these women, this was not just a meal, it was a moment of connection, of community. Breakfast became a ritual, a symbol of something normal in a world that had turned upside down. It was a shared experience, an act of defiance against the horrors they faced. The women would sit together, eat their breakfast, and for a brief moment, they could forget about the endless suffering and focus on the power of survival. These small moments of unity were vital. The act of sharing food, even if the portions were minuscule, helped to build a bond between the prisoners. It wasn't just about the calories. It was about the emotional and psychological sustenance that came from knowing you weren't alone. The women, often from different backgrounds and walks of life, had to rely on one another. Together, they could endure the harshness of captivity. Together, they could hold on to their humanity in the face of inhuman treatment. One poignant story comes from a woman named Elizabeth, a German female POW who had been taken from her home and separated from her family. When she first arrived at the camp, she was overwhelmed by the brutality of the environment. The cold, the hunger, the cruelty, it was almost too much to bear. But every morning, she would gather with the other women, eat her breakfast, and feel a moment of peace. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Elizabeth later recalled how the mornings, shared with others, were the only time during the day she could feel a semblance of normalcy. One morning, after a particularly brutal day of forced labor, Elizabeth fell ill. The cold had taken its toll, and she felt like she couldn't go on. But when she joined the others for breakfast, one of the women noticed her weakness and insisted that she eat more. "You'll make it through today," the woman told her, handing her an extra helping of potatoes. "We need you." That meal, that small act of kindness, kept Elizabeth going. It wasn't just the potatoes, it was the shared belief that survival was possible, even when the odds seemed impossible. Stories like Elizabeth's were not rare in the camps. Many women, though physically drained, managed to keep their spirits alive through these small, shared rituals. Breakfast became a constant reminder that, even in the most desperate of times, survival was possible. It wasn't just about the food, it was about holding on to a sense of self-worth and dignity in the face of adversity. The psychological aspect of food in these POW camps cannot be overstated. In extreme conditions, the mind can be just as important as the body in determining whether someone survives. For female POWs, who were often subject to the same physical hardships as their male counterparts, but with the added stress of sexual violence, emotional trauma, and a lack of autonomy, the mental toll was immense. Food, then, became more than just something to fill the stomach. It was a symbol of resistance. The breakfast ritual wasn't just a way to stave off hunger. It was a way to preserve hope. As the women gathered together to eat, they weren't just sharing food, they were sharing strength. The breakfast became a mental anchor, a small daily victory in a world filled with losses. There's a profound psychological phenomenon that occurs when humans share food. It creates bonds, it fosters community, and it reinforces a sense of normalcy. Even in the bleakest of situations, this shared act of eating allowed the women to reclaim a piece of their humanity. It reminded them that they were more than just prisoners. They were survivors, fighters, and sisters in arms. The breakfast, as simple as it was, gave them a reason to keep going, a reason to endure. What do you think? Can food really be the difference between life and death in such extreme circumstances? It's fascinating how something as simple as a meal can play such a significant role in survival. If you enjoyed hearing this story, I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think we underestimate the importance of food in survival situations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, there are many more untold stories from World War II that you won't want to miss. In our next video, we'll dive into another extraordinary survival story that may surprise you. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss it. Survival in a World War II POW camp wasn't just about the body's physical endurance. It was about overcoming mental and emotional exhaustion, staying connected to something that resembled humanity, and refusing to surrender to the horrors surrounding you. Female prisoners of war faced one of the cruelest challenges. Not only did they contend with the physical toll of hard labor, disease, and extreme deprivation, but they also dealt with the psychological weight of isolation, fear, and uncertainty. Each day in captivity brought new fears, new challenges. The hope of surviving wasn't just about getting through the next meal or completing a work task. It was about managing a mental state that could keep you alive in the face of overwhelming despair. And for these women, their breakfast ritual wasn't just a form of nourishment. It was the glue that held their sanity together. The mental toll of captivity is hard to understand for those who have never faced such a grueling, dehumanizing experience. Every morning was a gamble. Would you be able to keep your strength up today? Would you survive another grueling day of forced labor? Every meal was vital, and even the smallest food ration, like the breakfast that so many POWs relied on, was crucial in maintaining mental and physical stamina. But these women didn't just fight for their own survival. They fought for each other. The bonds formed in captivity were often stronger than any familial or romantic ties. They became each other's strength, leaning on one another not just for physical support, but for emotional survival as well. When one woman grew weak or discouraged, the others would step in to help, lifting her spirit with words of encouragement or by sharing whatever little food they had. Survival in a POW camp wasn't guaranteed. The psychological toll was immense. And yet for some, it was the very act of surviving together that gave them the strength to go on. The breakfast, this seemingly simple meal, became a symbol of that unity. The act of sharing something, even something as small as a meager meal, gave them a sense of purpose. For many, it was the last shred of dignity they could hold on to. When everything else had been stripped away, when they had been deprived of their freedom, their dignity, and their families, breakfast was still something they could share, something that was uniquely theirs. The role of food in survival, particularly in extreme conditions, goes far beyond just satisfying hunger. Scientific studies have shown that nutrition plays a significant role in maintaining cognitive function, mood stability, and overall physical health. During times of extreme stress, such as imprisonment or war, the body requires more than just calories to survive. It needs specific nutrients to support the immune system, prevent malnutrition, and maintain energy levels. For the German female POWs in World War II, the importance of food in their survival went beyond just filling their stomachs. The basic ingredients in their breakfast, oatmeal, brown bread, and potatoes, played a crucial role in providing the body with long-lasting energy, boosting immunity, and supporting mental clarity. Take, for instance, the humble oatmeal. This simple grain is a powerhouse when it comes to providing sustained energy. Oatmeal is rich in complex carbohydrates, which release energy slowly throughout the day. This was essential in a POW camp, where long hours of labor under brutal conditions were the norm. The slow-release energy from oatmeal helped to keep prisoners from feeling exhausted too quickly. Furthermore, oatmeal is high in fiber, which helps regulate blood sugar levels and provide a sense of fullness, reducing hunger pangs and keeping energy levels stable. In addition to oatmeal, brown bread made from whole grains provided essential nutrients like fiber, iron, and magnesium. These nutrients were crucial for maintaining muscle mass and overall physical health. Iron, for example, is necessary for producing hemoglobin, which carries oxygen throughout the body. Given the lack of proper medical care in the camps, this was vital in preventing the exhaustion and weakness that came with anemia. But perhaps the most critical component of their breakfast was the boiled potato. Potatoes are an incredible source of potassium, which helps regulate blood pressure and muscle function. Given the grueling labor and constant exposure to physical strain, the POWs needed all the help they could get to maintain muscle strength and prevent cramps and weakness. The vitamin C found in potatoes also played a crucial role in boosting the immune system, which was essential in an environment where disease was rampant and hygiene was almost non-existent. When combined, these foods provided not just the physical sustenance needed for survival, but also the mental boost required to endure another day in captivity. While the food was simple, it was designed to keep the body functioning as efficiently as possible, allowing these women to hold on to hope in the face of unimaginable hardship. The significance of the breakfast wasn't just about nutrition. It was about the survival of the human spirit. For many of the women who were imprisoned, the shared meal became a source of comfort, unity, and strength. These small acts of kindness, like sharing a bowl of oatmeal or passing around a piece of bread, became lifelines that helped the POWs hold onto their sense of identity and dignity. One woman, known only as Gertrude, recalls how she often had to ration out her portion of breakfast to last longer, as the food supply was always limited. Yet, despite the scarcity, she would share with those around her, offering a helping hand to her fellow prisoners. "We were all in this together," Gertrude later said. "Even though we had nothing, we still had each other." Gertrude's story is one of many that illustrate how food became a bond between the women. The act of sharing breakfast didn't just keep their bodies going, it kept their spirits alive. In a world where they were often treated as less than human, the simple act of breaking bread together became an act of rebellion against the forces trying to destroy them. Another survivor, Helga, vividly remembers how she and a small group of women would whisper to each other while eating their breakfast, telling stories about life before the war, sharing memories of their homes, and dreaming about the day they would be free again. "It was our moment of peace," Helga explained. "Even though the camp was full of horrors, we still had those small moments of connection. That's what kept me going." These shared moments, built around the seemingly trivial act of eating breakfast, became a source of emotional and psychological sustenance for these women. They created bonds that transcended the walls of the camp, bonds that were built on shared hardship and the will to survive together. The strength of the human will to survive is extraordinary. Despite the physical and emotional toll of captivity, these women found ways to endure, to adapt, and to survive. The breakfast was a key part of that survival, but it was the community, the bonds, and the shared human experience that truly kept them alive. The stories of these women, their daily struggles, and their survival tactics serve as a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. While the war has long passed, the lessons they left behind continue to resonate today. The idea that something as simple as breakfast can provide the key to survival is a powerful reminder of how important food and human connection are to our well-being. In the years following the war, many of these women went on to rebuild their lives. They carried with them the scars of their captivity, both physical and emotional, but they also carried with them the strength they had found in each other. The shared experience of surviving together in the camps was a bond that would never break. As we reflect on these stories, we are reminded that survival is not just about what happens to you physically. It's about how you hold onto your humanity, how you connect with others, and how you find strength in the face of adversity. For these women, breakfast wasn't just a meal. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is hope, there is community, and there is always the will to survive. What do you think? Can something as simple as a meal really make a difference in a life or death situation? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We would love to hear your perspective on how food can impact survival, both physically and mentally. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have more incredible untold stories to share. In the next video, we'll dive into another fascinating aspect of World War II survival, something you won't want to miss. Stay tuned, and thank you for being part of this journey with us. As the war came to an end and the survivors returned home, they faced an entirely new battle. Their bodies, though weakened, could heal over time with proper nutrition, rest, and medical attention. However, their minds, scarred by the brutality they had endured, faced a much harder path to recovery. The trauma of captivity doesn't simply vanish once the physical chains are removed. For many of these women, the psychological scars they carried would remain for the rest of their lives. The concept of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, wasn't well understood in the years immediately following World War II. The term had not yet entered mainstream medical discussions, and the idea that the mind could be deeply wounded by traumatic experiences wasn't fully acknowledged. But the reality for the female POWs was undeniable. Many of them struggled with flashbacks, nightmares, and an overwhelming sense of hopelessness long after the war ended. What's remarkable, though, is how the survival strategies that helped these women endure their physical hardships also played a role in helping them to slowly rebuild their mental health. The act of sharing breakfast in the POW camps, for example, created an emotional and psychological anchor. It provided a sense of normalcy and humanity in an environment where everything else had been stripped away. For many, the ritual of communal meals became a lifeline not just for survival, but for preserving their mental state. Once they were freed, many former POWs found it difficult to adjust to life after the war. The world had changed in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. The families they once knew were different, their homes had been destroyed, and the trauma they carried wasn't easily visible to others. Yet, despite these challenges, many of them spoke of how the strength they gained from those shared meals, the bond forged through their experiences, helped them to rebuild their lives. They learned to lean on one another in a way that transcended the war, building communities of survivors who understood what it meant to endure the worst of humanity and still emerge with their spirits intact. One story that stands out is that of Anna, a woman who, after being liberated, moved to the United States. She found it incredibly difficult to adapt to her new life, unable to connect with others who hadn't experienced what she had. The noise of normal life, the busyness of people around her, felt foreign and overwhelming. But Anna found solace in a small group of other female World War II survivors. Together, they began to share their stories, their trauma, and yes, their breakfasts once again. They would gather, sitting around a table, sometimes with a bowl of oatmeal or tea, and talk about their past, their present, and the struggles of adjusting to a world that had moved on without them. These women came to realize that the act of sharing meals, even years after the war, was a therapeutic process. It became a way of acknowledging what they had gone through, allowing themselves to feel, to mourn, and to heal. It wasn't just food. It was a chance to confront their trauma in a safe environment, surrounded by others who understood. The breakfast ritual, which had been so simple and so essential to their survival during the war, became a symbol of resilience in their post-war lives. Even if they could not fully escape the memories, they found strength in the idea that together they could begin to heal. They could continue to fight, not against their captors, but against the memories that haunted them. When we think about the heroes of history, we often focus on those who fought the hardest battles, those who took up arms and made history through their actions. But sometimes the greatest heroes are those who endure the unthinkable without weapons, without support, and in the face of complete desolation. The female POWs of World War II were exactly this type of hero. Their true resilience wasn't just in how they physically survived. It was in their ability to find hope and strength in the smallest of moments. In a world where everything else had been taken from them, they used food, not just for survival, but as a form of psychological warfare against their situation. They transformed the mundane into something extraordinary. That bowl of oatmeal, that piece of bread, that potato, which to many of us might seem trivial, was transformed into a powerful symbol of their will to survive. It became an act of defiance. This mental resilience was forged in the most extreme circumstances. Imagine being torn from your home, from your family, and being thrown into a prison camp where you had little control over anything, no access to freedom, no rights, and often no protection. For these women, each day was a fight to preserve something that wasn't physical, their humanity. One of the key lessons we learn from the stories of these women is that survival isn't just about holding on physically. It's about finding something to live for, even in the darkest moments. In the case of the POWs, it was their bond with one another, their shared rituals, and their commitment to survival that kept them going. The community they formed among themselves helped create a sense of purpose. This mental resilience is something that psychologists and survival experts continue to study today. They point to the importance of mental frameworks, how individuals frame their experiences, how they interpret their suffering, and how they find meaning in hardship. These women, who endured unimaginable pain, found ways to hold on to their sanity, their strength, and ultimately, their lives. The war did not end when the last bomb dropped or when the peace treaties were signed. For these women, their war continued long after liberation. It continued in their minds, in their daily struggles to regain a sense of normalcy, and in their attempts to rebuild their lives from the ashes. Yet, they didn't let their trauma define them. They used it as a tool for healing, for building relationships, and for keeping their memories alive. The breakfast they shared in captivity became more than just a routine. It was a symbol of their survival, a daily ritual that gave them the strength to keep fighting. It was a metaphor for life after the war. Even when everything else had been taken away, there was still a moment of shared humanity, a small space where they could come together and rebuild bit by bit. As these women moved on with their lives, they didn't forget the lessons they had learned in the camps. They didn't forget the importance of small acts of connection, the power of a meal shared, and the strength that comes from supporting one another. While the horrors of the war were something they would carry with them forever, the act of surviving together became something they could hold on to, a lasting testament to the human spirit's resilience. In a way, that shared breakfast was more than just a meal. It was a constant reminder of their capacity to endure. The simplicity of it all, the basic ingredients of life, was enough to get them through the worst of times. And even as they moved forward, rebuilding their lives, that lesson stayed with them. It was a symbol of survival, of community, and of the power of the human spirit to rise above even the most horrific experiences. These women understood, perhaps better than most, that life after war was never truly the same. But they also understood that survival didn't mean simply existing. It meant finding a way to live, to rebuild, and to remember. And they found this strength, not just in themselves, but in the shared meals, the bonds they had formed, and the memories they carried forward. As we reflect on the incredible survival stories of these women, we're reminded of the power of resilience and community. Their ability to withstand the unthinkable, to find strength in the smallest of rituals, and to rebuild their lives after such profound trauma speaks volumes about the capacity of the human spirit. The breakfast that kept them alive wasn't just about food. It was about hope, about connection, and about the will to survive in a world that had tried to strip everything away. Their stories remind us that even in the most challenging of circumstances, there is always something that can sustain us, something that can give us the strength to keep going. For these women, that strength came in the form of food, in the form of each other, and in a shared understanding that survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about finding the will to live, even when the world seemed determined to break them. And perhaps, more than anything, their legacy is a reminder that survival is not just about what happens to us physically. It's about what we do with the experiences that shape us. It's about how we rebuild, how we continue to connect, and how we turn our darkest moments into sources of strength. The breakfast, in its simplicity, became a metaphor for life itself. A life that, no matter how difficult, was worth fighting for. What do you think about these women's resilience? Can something as simple as a meal really make all the difference in survival? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found their story inspiring, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more untold survival stories. In our next video, we'll take a deep dive into another remarkable chapter of World War II survival, one that you won't want to miss. Stay tuned, and thank you for watching.